Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to yet another live at the Waterhole. We're first up. We're in the wonderful Madikwe Game Reserve at the northwest province of South Africa at the wonderful Jamala Lodge. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirsts and cool off. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth as it appears on your screen. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it on through. And it seems like a nice clear day. However, there is a little bit of clouds around. Sometimes that can even make it a bit warmer. It seems to be high level clouds, and it seems to be nice and hot already. And we see this lovely little breeding herd of elephants coming in. Yesterday, we also had lots of activity from the elephants from Tembe Elephant Park, as also in Tau, which was also here in the game reserve. And then we saw some pelicans at Victoria Falls, which was probably the highlight of the show for me. Not taking anything away from the elephants, it's just that we do see them quite a lot. So I like it when there's some special sightings, and that definitely was a special one for me. So what is it that's going to be special today? Well, you'll have to sit back and wait and see. As we do see some of the is also joining there. And a little youngster potentially going to have a charge at the zebra. But speaking of the weather, I think it's time we're going to have a look what it's going to be like across all the different locations. So it looks like a balmy and perfect winter's day. Upper 20s, most areas, and so nice and clear. Doesn't seem to be much rain about. And that does bode well for lots of animals down for a drink. You can see some more elephants up off in the thickets on the right. I wonder if they're slowly going to make their way down as well. So just trying to work out what this little squeaky bird is. Almost sounds like a Cokie Franklin, but I need to hear a little bit more of it to be sure. And being part of the greater Kalahari system, semi-arid part of the country as well, you can see why. It's very dry, and normally also the rain shouldn't be coming now, but you never can tell. They do need it. I see a bit of milling about from the elephants. I wonder if they're having a discussion. Very often when they do go stationary like that, there is some kind of conversation underway. And Catherine already commenting, saying, why is South African winter warmer than my summer? Not fair. Yeah, well, that's the truth of the matter. A lot of our winter days are even better than the summer days in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm not sure where you're from, Catherine. You're welcome to let us know. But pretty sure that would be the case then, if you're saying that. I know lots of Scotland as well, speaking about our winter's days. Kim Faustino saying good evening. Yeah, good afternoon, good evening to you. You must be an international that's coming to us from another country, not in our time zone. And Canine Girl saying afternoon, all great to be with you. Looking forward to seeing some sights this afternoon. Absolutely. And the wildlife will dictate where we go to next. Obviously, try and stay where the action is. Don't really head over to waterholes if there's not much occurring. Stephen Boyd saying absolutely brilliant to see the different wildlife that visit the waterholes. It is a wonderful concept, this, with these different dam cams that we have, and with Africam involved as well. And so the animals don't know that we're watching them too. And so it adds that extra aspect to it as well. That there's absolutely no interference whatsoever. There's something walking along that pathway that looks a bit suspiciously like either a baboon or a hyena. Can you see it? Directly above these elephants now, on the same pathway that the other elephants that may have come through would have. Is that elephant highway there? What is that? It looks like a baboon. I think I just see the shape of its tail and the way that it goes up and then turns and hangs downward. I think he's foraging along the pathway. There's probably lots of elephant dung there. And so they often flip those over. Yep, it is indeed a Papio ursinus. Chacma baboon. Here comes some more. Normally not on their own. And you see, it was a giveaway just with that, the way the tail hangs. And that's what led me to believe it was, in fact, the Chacma baboon and not a hyena. They'll also be flipping rocks over. You often see them doing that. There's very often all sorts of things underneath the rocks, from grubs to beetles and scorpions and all sorts. They go for that too. So, question coming in saying, hello, we are Azare and Dildarav from England. Welcome aboard, and asking how much water and food does elephants need in a day? So, Dildarav and Azare, generally, a fully grown adult elephant can take up to 100 kilograms, sometimes a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on what they feed on. But plant material on a daily basis, and they can drink up to 200 liters of water with that as well. Now, that's sort of in general. It's on feed, as I say, as to how nutritious it is, as to how much they would feed on, and how much moisture content is in that feed as well would also dictate how much they would drink, as well as the current temperature and climate on the particular day. Because when it's hot, like it looks like it potentially is today, they would obviously drink a lot more to keep themselves cool. So it all depends, but you could go with those numbers, kilos of food and around 200 liters of water a day. It's not to be scoffed at. There's a lot of food requirement for such a big animal, and obviously calories required to fuel such a big body. See this whole, looks like a bigger breeding herd coming in to drink now. Now, these elephants coming in, I wonder if they're chatting with this group that's already here before they make their arrival, because they've all gone still suddenly. And this is very often what I say to guests and people that are with me on vehicle, and if they do go out on self-drive, that when you approach elephants or you see elephants or you're anywhere around elephants, whenever you're in the park, best to act like an elephant. Now, elephants would never rush up on each other because then they're looking for a fight and they're going to get an aggressive response. So you never do that with elephants either. So acting like them, give them a nice chance to know that you're there, that you're present, and be comfortable with your presence before you make an approach. And then approaching with respect, nice and slowly, and always respecting their pathway and their escape routes and their space. You see now, this breeding herd that was here looks like they're way for the arriving group. Just fascinating interactions always with the elephants. But standing dead still like that, always an indication that they're communicating with each other. Very low pitch rumbles. And what we can hear is obviously the high pitched trumpets as well. It looks like a little bit of contact with the youngsters, but otherwise not much else. These are all very civil, everybody taking up their little spot around the waterhole, and they're coming to their preferred drinking site here now. This is where the fresh water comes out, so that's where they do like to drink. Sounded like some wildebeest calling somewhere around here. So Mercedes Bean is saying, greetings, Ralph and WildEarth crew. Happy Tuesday from California. And greetings straight back at you, Mercedes Bean. Lovely to have you on board once again. Danny saying the way elephants communicate must be the most fascinating thing. And on full display right here, right now, Danny, you can hear a lot of the trumpets, not really getting through all the low rumbles. A lot of it is inaudible to our ears, regardless. But it is a fascinating thing to see. And the more time you spend around them, the more you wish you knew. As I've spent countless hours in and amongst the herds, as well as the big bulls, even when they're in must as well. And it never gets old, that's for sure. Canine Girl asking, is there ever times where two different herds and matriarchs join together permanently? Canine Girl, yes, there will be times when this happens. It's not always permanent. Sometimes it is just temporary, where sort of, you've got the different clans and tribes and herds within the bigger groups or populations of elephants within a given area. And sometimes it can be that you get a herd that grows, and then you have splinter cells that move off, and so you have a bit of a shrinking of that initial herd. And sometimes they can return back to that herd, some of the groupings that have broken off, and return and make a permanent return. And so it all depends on the dynamics within the different herds. But it definitely is always in flux, and it's ever changeable. The only constant is change within the wildlife and the elephant groups as well. So anything's possible within them. And just like us as humans, I think they do have their differences, but they can also get past them as well and come together once more. So, yeah, that's why it's always fascinating to watch them and try and work out the dynamics within the different groups as well. And Stephen Boyd saying it's pouring down with rain in the UK. Shame, Stephen, stuck on the mud island. Well, there's definitely no rain here. You're welcome to send some our way. I'm sure the elephants and the wildlife here would appreciate it. Yeah, there's a call of a wildebeest. That's why I also call them gnu, because I would think that that's the sort of sound in phonetics that they make. Gnu. In Dutch, they call it a gnu. But yeah, anyway, blue wildebeest, brindled gnu. Some zebra there wanting to come in for a drink with the youngster elephant, probably a bull. He's got his ears out at them and probably going to have some fun charging them and stopping them from drinking. And when you have a lot of elephants here, as we have had in the past, you can almost see the level of the water dropping while they are here. Because, as I say, if each animal's going into 3 digits in terms of liters of water, then you've got a lot of liters disappearing out of the water all at once. And then it's quite easy to see how quickly it will dry up. But in the winter months, it will obviously have an effect on how much they drink. It's not as hot, so they don't need to fill up the waterhole then as much as they would in summer. And maybe that's the reason why they're not drinking at their favorite spot. This one, obviously closest to us, having a test and see if there's any fresh water coming out. That's the spot where it does indeed come out. So I wonder, I don't think there's anything coming out currently. Bit of a sparring session going on with the younger bulls on the opposite bank there. So I'm changing my mind now with the bird call. I think it's actually guinea fowl with a little part of their whistling call that are making this noise. I thought initially maybe we'd be lucky and we're listening to a Cokie Franklin, but I think it's most likely the helmeted guinea fowl. Another baboon there off on the left, maybe thinking about coming through for a drink. Still foraging, looking through all the dung, flipping things over as they go. Looks like a decent-sized male, that, walking with intent. And there's a couple of impala there having a go at each other just under that leadwood. The rams, we are heading into the rut now. Oh, and the baboons having a bit of a tiff. And chase the spurfowl out of the thickets. Yeah, I think he's intent on coming for a drink. So that young bull elephant now just reminding that male baboon who's boss. Pick on somebody your own size, buddy. Well, it doesn't look like it scared the baboon too much. He's just moved off a little bit there. Probably just going to wait and see when he can come through for a drink. So this troop is now gathering. More and more of these baboons coming through. And you can see, as I was saying, foraging as they go, feeding on all sorts. They are omnivorous, much like us. So they will eat plant protein as well as animal protein as well. Insects and grubs, scorpions, arthropods. They'll also eat berries and fruits and just general greenery as well. You can see that one picking at plants. So he's getting in his greens for the day. Now, I often say to guests as well and viewers that Watching baboons and what they feed on is not necessarily a good indication of what we would be able to eat as well out here in the bush, because they've got very strong stomach acids and different to ours, that they would be able to tolerate things that would make us very sick. Potentially the other way around as well. I haven't seen anything that has made baboons sick that they've eaten from us. Maybe the likes of chilies, which we've also used as a deterrent, but the baboons still eat it, but it does seriously affect them. But you can watch monkeys who have a very similar acid in their stomachs as we do. So if monkeys are eating mushrooms or berries, you can be almost guaranteed it's a very good indicator that you can eat it as well. And I've used it as a test and eaten different mushrooms that I've seen monkeys eating. And, well, I'm still here today. So the test worked. And the mushrooms were very tasty. And I've also eaten some fruits and berries that they've been feeding on as well. Until this day, all the tests that I've done on eating things that monkeys eat, I've never become sick. So I'll go with that one. Now, Vicky was asking, do the elephants visit this side of the waterhole or the other one at Madikwe more? I think she was referring to Tau. So, because we do hop between the two of them, this one being further down in the south of Madikwe, whereas Tau is much closer to the Botswana border, further up north. Vicky, I would say that it's a little bit different. In full summer, we had more elephants here than we've had anywhere else. This place was packed with elephants. But as we've gone into winter, there's actually been more elephants at Tau. Not quite in the same numbers as we've had coming through here at Jamala. And I would say more breeding herds actually coming through here. So I'll definitely think that on average, you could probably say there's still more elephants visiting Jamala. And breeding herds in particular. At Tau, we do have breeding herds coming through, but it's not quite in the same numbers. But there has been an uptick in the amount of elephants at Tau now going into the winter months. So I wonder if that's a little bit of movements within the park, much like I have observed in the likes of Okukuyu in Etosha National Park in Namibia, where the rains in an arid area particularly does influence the movements of very water-dependent and heavily food-dependent animals such as elephants. So they have like mini migrations within the park itself. Maybe the elephants have moved a little bit further to the north in the park, and I'm just speculating because that's what happens in Etosha, which is obviously quite a bit bigger than Madikwe, but still very arid as well. And when the rains come and they start sort of December period going into January, February, all the elephants leave the western side of the park, most of them, and they head towards the rain where it comes in the east. So, and only returning around the period when it starts to get dry, which is now. So we're starting to have elephants in the Okukuyu region once more, which says to me that they've done their mini migration back into those parts. So I wonder if that's what's happening here in Madikwe as well. Oh, one of the youngsters just laid down. If he's going to have a snooze, it's next to the waterside. Oh, starting to get up again. Looks like his little snooze or his rest is already over. Little baby on the opposite bank having a drink from mum. And the two impala rams in the left-hand corner still going at it. As we slowly see the baboons also moving through in the background there. Lovely mix of animals here now. Okay, so as always, lovely stop in here at Jamala. But I think it's time to change of place and let's go to the Tembe Elephant Park. And it seems it is indeed all about the elephants so far. A lovely big bull there. It's a shame he's just disappeared behind the brush. Quite a few elephants here yesterday. There's another one. And still a couple of woolly neck storks. There does seem to be more elephants moving through in the background. Also lots of impala there. And a warthog grazing through in the background on the other side of the waterhole as well. I think it's a grey heron on the right, near to those palm fronds. Much greener in these parts here at KwaZulu-Natal, very tropical, different to Madikwe, which is semi-arid and part of the greater Kalahari system. So the animals here, as I was mentioning, probably don't need to drink as much water as they would have to in Madikwe, because not only have they got a lot of evergreen plants and lots of lush greenery to feed on that's full of moisture, it's also very humid. It doesn't quite get as hot, but obviously with the added humidity, it does add to that stress. However, just with the sort of lower temperatures and the food availability with the moisture content in there, I would say that they probably drink quite a considerable less amount of water here in these parts than in the Kalahari regions. And also a little bit overcast, so the sun coming and going. And the animals just going about their day. Warthogs grazing. Looks like the impala probably ruminating off there in the shade. A woolly neck stork doing a bit of browsing as well. There comes the sun again, constantly changing the colors and things of what it looks like. And that elephant bull enjoying a lovely drink. and lovely bird calls going on all the time. You can hear the little high-pitched whistle of the blue waxbills. You can hear a little bit of a croaky call from a chin-spot datus. And every now and then there's a yellow-breasted apellis also calling, like the techno bird that we call them. Right, so nice little stop in here with all of these different animals, but I think once again, time to change of place, and this time let's go to Zimbabwe and Victoria Falls. Where we've still got our pelicans that are hanging about. Lovely to see that there were lots yesterday. Sacred ibis foraging in front, and there's some yellow-billed storks in the background as well. So just a couple of interesting things about these great white pelicans that we're looking at here. They live in shallow swamps, pretty much across Africa. And it's one of the largest flying birds in the world. It has the abilities of multiple birds, such as long flights, as well as swimming. Its unique characteristic is the gular pouch inside its beak that it's able to store fish in, as I'm sure a lot of you would know. You see these undertakers here in the foreground, in the marabou storks. So Adam was asking, do birds with damaged beaks or bills survive? Well, Adam, they can do it. It depends on the severity of the damage or the injury on the bill itself, because the keratin covering over the beak can grow back. It does come back very slowly over weeks or months. As we see a little African jacana there in front. So there is potential for it healing, but if it's not able to heal, there's also potential for them not being able to feed properly. And so they could then sort of slowly lose condition and be prone to both predation as well as illness as they get weaker. So I think it all depends, as I say initially, on the severity of that injury itself. But they can survive quite bad injuries. Ones that you'd think would, make them incapable of feeding properly. And they surprisingly do return. As with a lot of animals out in the bush, they are extremely hardy and generally do make a comeback. It also very often depends on the health of the animal at the time of the injury. If they're very healthy when that happens, they generally pull through quite easily. But if they're not, then that's one of the deciding factors that would lead to their unfortunate demise. There's been lovely birding here over the last couple of days at Vic Falls. Lots of big birds, raptors. Maybe this is where the storks gather to get all the babies for deliveries around Africa. Yeah? What's your thinking? It's just a hub of activity going on here. Everybody foraging for something. Sacred ibis to the marabou storks and the yellow-billed storks, and even the pelicans. And you saw them on the other side. Oh, some kudu also coming in for a drink. It's getting even busier. You can hear the calls of Egyptian geese there. All right, so lovely birding here at Vic Falls, but I think it is time to change of place. So let's head back to the Madikwe Game Reserve, but this time to Tau. Well, it looks like they want to challenge Jamala in the south and challenge my reasoning about them migrating more into these parts. And the breeding herds have showed up. Lots of blue wildebeest off in the background as well. But what a sight this is. Elephants putting on a show for us today. So there was a question from Mindy Tillapore about the pelicans. Obviously, we're not there anymore, but I still want to answer it. And asking, can pelicans eat both fresh water and saltwater fish, or doesn't that matter to them? I think it's a very good question, Mindy, because you find them in both settings. So I just found a little bit of a write-up. This one coming from Wikipedia. And they speak of pelicans will frequent inland waterways, but are most known for their residing along maritime and coastal zones, where they feed principally on fish in their large throat pouches, diving into the water and catching them at or near the water's surface. They can adapt to varying degrees of water salinity, from freshwater and brackish to most commonly seawater. So there's your answer. They can do pretty much all of that. And obviously very adaptable in the salinity and the water that they take in. And Abe Ismain saying hello from New Jersey. Wow, real international audience we have today. That's wonderful to have you on board, Abe. And hello straight back at you. This is quite a decent sized breeding herd. You can see there are lots of different ages within the group. A nice close-up of the elephants as they march out of the area, kicking up the dust. What a wonderful sight that is. Oh, and trying to kick each other at the same time. always fun to watch the youngsters, especially getting control of those trunks of theirs. So just while we're enjoying being in the presence of these elephants and watching them come in and through for a drink, looking for some interesting studies on elephants, because in the past I've gone through all sorts of journals and research papers, etc. So looking for something a little bit different, and I've happened upon a lovely article on The Conversation, which is all about academic rigor and journalistic flair. And they've got an article which was published on the 26th of December 2023, so quite recent, speaking of the unusual ancient elephant tracks that had their team of fossil experts stumped, and how they solved the mystery. And having read a little bit of it, this is why I wanted to impart it to you, because it is really interesting. And they say that over the past 15 years, through scientific study of tracks and traces, we've identified more than 350 fossil vertebrate track sites from South Africa's Cape South coast. Most are found in cemented sand dunes called Eleonites, and are all from the Pleistocene epoch, ranging in age from about 35,000 to 400,000 years. During that time, they've honed their identification skills and have become used to finding and interpreting track sites, a field called ecology, not to be confused with ichthyology, which is the study of fish. And yet, every once in a while, we encounter something we immediately realize is so novel that it has been found nowhere else on Earth. Such a moment of unexpected discovery happened in 2019 along the coastline of the De Hoop Nature Reserve, about 200 kilometers east of Cape Town. Less than 2 meters away from a cluster of fossil elephant tracks was a round feature 57 centimeters in diameter, containing concentric ring features. Another layer was exposed about 7 centimeters below this surface, and it contained at least 14 parallel groove features. Where the grooves approached the rings, they made a slight curve towards them. The two findings, they hypothesized, were connected with each other and appeared to have a common origin. Elephants are the largest, heaviest land animals. They leave large, deep, easily recognizable tracks. And they've documented 35 fossilized elephant track sites in the study area, as well as the first evidence of fossilized elephant trunk drag impressions. So elephants, like another group of massive land creatures, dinosaurs, can be viewed as geological engineers that create minor earth-moving forces on the ground as they walk. And this can be related also to a remarkable ability that elephants possess, communicating by generating seismic waves. These are a form of energy that can travel under the surface of the earth. And the feature they found in 2019 seemed to reflect just such a phenomenon, an elephant triggering waves that rippled outwards. After additional investigation and a thorough search for alternative explanations, they reported in a recently published study that they believe they've found the world's first trace fossil signature of seismic underground communication between elephants. How is that? Fossilized underground waves that have, to indicate communication between them. That's incredible. And since the 1980s, an ever-increasing body of literature has documented elephant seismicity and seismic communication through infrasound. The lower threshold of human hearing is 20 hertz. Below that, low-frequency sounds are known as infrasound. So elephant rumbles originating in the larynx and transmitted into the ground through the limbs fall within the infrasonic range. An infrasound at high amplitude, it would seem very loud to us if at a slightly higher frequency, can travel further than high-frequency sounds over distances as great as 6 kilometers. Elephants have an advantage here. Lighter creatures cannot generate low-frequency sound waves through vocalizations. So it's thought that long-distance seismic communication can allow elephant groups to interact over substantial distances. And it's been shown that sandy terrain allows the communication to travel the furthest. This is what I love. Every day we find something new or interesting about the elephants. And it was nice to see that the crocodile out of the water there, sunning itself too. So, question coming in from Diane in the UK. Hi Diane, welcome aboard. Saying, hi Ralph, is it unusual for mammary glands to be at the front? Are there other mammals that have them? So yes, indeed. Quite interesting how they're avoiding this crocodile. So, pretty much all the primates as mammals, so we're not the only ones. Monkeys, baboons, as part of the African mammals. But in terms of non-primates, so all primates have mammary glands at, behind the front legs. But non-primate animals that have mammary glands between their forelimbs would be the manatees, the hyraxes or the dussies, and there's also a shrew mouse that also has teeth near to the forearms. All of which are relatives of the elephant, so all within the same group or similar origins. So quite interesting that they're the other group apart from the primates that have similar mammary glands, and why the scientists believe that they are related with other similarities, obviously similar placenta, similar dental structure, similar foot structure, and those mammary glands behind the forelimbs. Now this individual we've seen on a number of occasions. He's got one floppy ear. He's a nice big bull. He does interact quite nicely with the other bulls, but it all depends on his current state of affairs. We'll have to wait and see what mood he comes in on. There's a robin of sorts calling there. I think it might be a white-browed scrub robin. Obviously, the robins are the real songbirds, so they have real songs, and you can distinguish them from the other birds by these particular calls and the songs that they make. The rest of the birds obviously can call, all the perching birds, but they don't quite make the kind of songs that robins do. These lovely big old bulls, what stories they would be able to tell. Beautiful reflections now as well on the water. Doesn't seem to be any wind around whatsoever, making for these lovely mirror-like perceptions. There's quite a number of birds calling now. There's still the little blue waxbills and the chinspot batters. There's a grey go-away bird as well joining them. So nice question come in from Darkmane Lover saying, Ralph, where in Africa have the most elephants? So Darkmane Lover, according to the WWF, they say that in 2016, okay, it's a few years ago, so things have probably changed, but I would say that they've probably increased since then. The IUCN reported that Africa's elephant population had seen its worst decline in 25 years. This is why I'm saying that potentially there has been an increase, mostly as a result of intensified poaching for ivory. In East Africa, elephant populations have nearly halved in a decade. Botswana is currently home to more elephants than any other African country, and Southern Africa remains a stronghold for 293,000, or 70% of the estimated remaining African elephants. I think they've got a bit of a handle on that poaching in East Africa, and the populations in Southern Africa have continued to increase, where we don't really have a poaching problem on elephants. It's almost solely on rhino. We don't really hear reports very often on poaching incidences on elephants in Southern Africa. That bull is now leaving in a hurry, kicking up the dust as he goes, but walking very intently. So there was a question also earlier from Lorraine, who was asking where are ellies most abundant in South Africa? And I would say that that's definitely got to be in the Kruger National Park, where they've got over 13,000 elephants. I'm not sure when they last did any census or counts, but I do know that their numbers were increasing quite substantially. And I think the last one that they did, they actually had increased by 5%. So that's good news for them. If we look here at the Madikwe Game Reserve, it's estimated around 1,500, the population being of elephants. I think that's probably one of the highest numbers in the country as well. If we look at the Addo Elephant National Park, that's one of the most concentrated populations of elephants anywhere in the world. Where they've got over 600 elephants, but it's a much smaller reserve, obviously, than the Kruger. Carrying capacity is much higher per square kilometer because of the food availability as well as water. They have all year rainfall, so they can have more concentrated populations in those parts, obviously still keeping the size of the park in mind. Here, much bigger than the adult park, so although they've got more, they're not as concentrated, and the carrying capacity per square kilometer will be less in these parts because there's less food and availability as well as less water availability as well. So it all depends on where they are in the country, which biome they occur in, what the rainfall is like. And so in the Cape Province, especially in that area around Addo, I think naturally occurring could have been and would have been the highest populations of elephants in South Africa. But it sort of all fell foul to ivory hunters and later the natural areas turning into farmlands because it's so rich, and because of the all-year rainfall, it makes for excellent farming. So those areas obviously went for human use, and the areas around the Kruger Park, luckily, were still saved for wildlife. All right, so as always, lovely stop in here at Tau, but I think it's time to change it all up, and let's head to Oldonyo in Kenya. Where for the first time in a long time, we've got some zebra returning. That is wonderful. A few months ago, a number of months ago, we had lots here, but it's been very quiet on that regard. Nice to see them back. Hear the calls of the oxpeckers. A nice close-up view of the different stripe patterns on these two individuals. No two the same. So Moonbeam Smith is asking, is it true that the stripes on the ladies meet at the bottom, whereas the ones on the males don't? Moonbeam Smith, I've always heard this theory, but I've never been able to confirm it myself, so I'm still none the wiser. And yes, that is the theory, but as I say, for me, it's only the obvious part on the males and the females that gives it away. And I've never been able to find another way by their stripes to properly identify between the two. I think it's a bit of a hit and miss on this stripe story, because some will, and then I've sat with students and they've had that theory, and then I've been able to disprove it in showing, that some males do meet and some females don't. So I don't think it's foolhardy, but there might be something to it. I just haven't been able to confirm it. What I can say for certain is that they are really one of the most photogenic animals in the bush, that's for sure, especially when there's lots of them and they all go to drink together and you have mirror effects and all sorts. All right, so nice little stop in here with our donkeys in pajamas in Kenya. But I think let's change of place and let's switch it up again, and let's head on over to Namibia and the Great White Place. where just as I was saying earlier, the elephants have returned to these parts. And so we can see lots of breeding herds coming through, as well as the bulls. And we can expect them to spend lots of time here at this waterhole, and a real tourist favorite, this particular spot. So now that we're here in one of the smallest deserts in the world, it is, though, the oldest desert in the world. It started forming over 80 million years ago. It's only been a true desert for 18 million years, but that's still the oldest desert in the world. It's the driest desert in the world, and it's got some of the most amazing indigenous and endemic animals and plants. That makes it the living desert. But with that in mind, did you know that the south coast of South Africa, and when we say the south coast, that's the south coast in KwaZulu-Natal, not the Southern Cape, which is quite a tropical area, is home to the world's smallest desert. And it's Port Edward. This is actually where all of my family came into Africa as traders in the Umzimvubu River. But Port Edward's unusual claim to fame is the Red Desert. It's the world's smallest, and it lies some 10 kilometers west of the town and is only 200 meters in diameter and 11 hectares in its entirety. And it's best described as a miniature version of the Arizona desert, with man-high hills and valleys of naked red soil in contrast to the surrounding lush and tropical vegetation. But archaeological artifacts going back millions of years can be found, and the locals are pleased that it is now an internationally protected heritage site and also globally recognized as the world's smallest desert. Looks like there's a little bit of consternation, potentially another group of elephants arriving. They do like to come in from the left, sort of around the campsite at Okukuyu. I've often stood at the actual fence itself while the elephants are filing past, and so just literally less than 2 meters apart, just quietly watching them and listening to them as they walk past. It's an amazing experience. I've often taken guests as well, but important to be quiet and not rustle around, because there's only a fence between you and it's not even electrified. So they could very easily get through there. Plus, you don't want to disturb them, but it's a wonderful experience for the guests to be so close to the elephants on foot. There's quite a few zebra on the opposite side as well, just stumbling through the calcareed rocks. They're quite used to it, though. What else do we have there? Looks like a blue wildebeest, or a few of them. Might be the odd oryx or gemsbok. And that very iconic leadwood tree just in behind these elephants. Obviously too strong for them to push over. Combretum imberbe being the Latin name. And held in very high regard, especially with the local Namibians, particularly the Hereros and the Himbas, which it's the sacred tree for them. And in their little villages, the chief always has his door. He doesn't have a door on his house, and his door always faces the holy fire, which is the connection to the ancestors, and the fire never goes out, and particularly because they use the wood of the leadwood tree. So it's so dense that it sinks in water, but also if broken into pieces and used as firewood, it burns for very, very long. I would challenge, there's probably not many trees on the planet that will burn as long as the leadwood tree, and so mixes in well with the sort of ancestral stories with the Hereros, and with it being a very held in high regard in their traditions, with the holy fire and the connection to their ancestors. So Canine Girl was asking, as oxpeckers move from animal to animal for ticks, etc., can this pass disease through species? I think it possibly could, but a lot of the actual diseases that are tick-borne, it's normally, around their mouth parts and then biting into the animal. So I think there probably is some diseases that could be passed between them, but I would imagine that it would need the actual ticks to be, passing those diseases on with the biting and feeding on the animals and the anticoagulants, etc., that they, use to be able to drink the blood from the animals that they're parasitizing. But I'll do a little bit of digging into that and see if there is actually any diseases that are passed on by oxpeckers. It's an interesting one. I would never have thought so, but I don't want to say no until I've confirmed it. I'm old enough to know that you should never say never. So I'll find out for you, Canine Girl, and let you know. So lovely herd of zebra coming in, and this is one of the most iconic moments for me, watching zebra at a waterhole, because I've sat here in person so many times, and I think it's probably one of the most photogenic spots that I've ever been to in any wildlife situations, especially when you have these big herds coming in, and they're only going to get bigger from now as it gets drier as well. But back to our question around the oxpeckers and if they pass on diseases, I haven't, just on quick research, been able to find any evidence that the birds themselves pass on disease. It all speaks of them sort of limiting the ticks and so on. But while I was looking, I sort of happened across a lovely blog that's written by Ali Ross from Sabi Sabi, and she's speaking, and we've just had to change of place. A little bit of breakup in picture there, or Kikuyu, so we've headed on back to Jamala. And I'll just carry on the chat. And around this blog, written by Ali Ross of Sabi Sabi, speaking of yellow-billed oxpeckers in particular and why they're so rare, in fact, because mostly all the oxpeckers that we see are red-billed. You get a lot of yellow-billed oxpeckers in the Kruger, and they're almost exclusively on buffalo, but definitely not as many as the red-billed. And the yellow-billed oxpecker have formed a symbiotic relationship with large mammals and make a highly specialized living by feeding on the ticks and other ectoparasites on them. They're well suited to a life on their hosts, considering their total dependency on them. The unique physical adaptations include short legs and sharp claws, clinging onto sparse hairs of their hosts. And so at home are these birds that they often sleep on their hosts at night. I'm sure many of you may be wondering what all the hype is regarding the yellow-billed oxpecker nest. Well, let me tell you, these highly specialized birds with a very narrow ecological niche run the risk of population decline if circumstances change in the slightest. And this was in fact witnessed in the 19th century. For any bird nerd out there, this little discovery is exceptionally exciting. We may see these birds in and amongst the massive buffalo herds that pass through the Sabi areas as well as into Kruger, but to witness a nest site is a whole new ballgame. By 1915, yellow-billed oxpeckers were believed to be extinct as breeding species in the Republic of South Africa. And their decline was due to an increase in hunting pressure on their main mammal symbiont, and these animals being their main food source. The species was then suffered another drastic decline when the outbreak of rinderpest in 1896 decimated the remaining population of buffalo and cattle populations. And the subsequent use of arsenical compounds in cattle dips decimated the remaining populations. So their range then shrank to large game areas in northern Namibia, northern Botswana, and western Zimbabwe. However, sightings of them returning were steadily recorded in the Kruger National Park since 1979, and the first definite indication of breeding in these birds in South Africa was then recorded back in January 1984. It's also interesting to read about that even back in the 19th century, how human habitation, hunting, and disease had an impact on the natural world. For those of you who may not be aware, rinderpest was an infectious viral disease that ripped through cattle, buffalo, and other antelope species, characterized by fever, oral erosions, necrosis, high mortality rate. So rinderpest is actually a German word for cattle plague. But as the epidemic simmered to an end in 1897, it took with it many ungulates these birds depended upon, and in particular the African buffalo. So there were said to be around a dozen left. The present day, 2020, yellow-billed oxpeckers are really regularly sighted on the now stable and ever-rising population of African buffalo, so making a very good comeback, which is wonderful. And I always like these good news stories. And that's a lovely way for us to just about end the show, because that's where we just about are. So I hope you've all enjoyed it and the chats that we've had. I certainly have. And of course, I'll be back tomorrow once again. Same time, same place. So don't miss out. And I'd love to have you on board once again. But obviously, don't forget that a little later on, there is the Sunset Safari. So don't miss out. Lots of wildlife still coming your way. All right, so now that these elephants have or are busy leaving, I think we'll also leave and we'll go where the elephants are returning, and that's at Tau. Once again, that mirror effect, as well as these black-winged stilts in the foreground. And of course, our Zebby Zebs in the background there, keeping the flies at bay. One of the best fly swats in the bush. So, and also before the end of the show, I think it's a good time for me to remind you about a private safari on Amakhala Game Reserve in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, one of my favorite areas in the country. And there you can discover the wild heart of South Africa on a safari adventure with myself on the place of many aloes, the Amakhala Game Reserve. And there are limited spaces available for 6 lucky guests on the safari. So if you'd like to find out more, you can go onto the WildEarth website and click on travel. I'd love to have you on board with me, and we can contact about all things wildlife, and I'm sure we'll have lots of laughs around the campfire as well. So, Bill, I think it's Bill the Bull. Lovely to have a from you once again. Ralph, are the leadwood trees protected in South Africa? They are, yes, Bill, because they're so slow growing. They're highly sought after for their, very prized wood. They are indeed protected because very easily taken advantage of and would take a long time for them to grow back. So, yes. And Prairie Dog saying super elephantastic. Yes, it has been, hasn't it? A little bit of technical problems here at the end, but we've still been able to hop around, and everywhere seems to have elephants. It's that time of the day. And it's a lovely hot winter's day, but it's just about done for me. So I'll be saying goodbye shortly, and we'll be leaving you with this little youngster. So I hope you've all enjoyed the show. Once again, I certainly have. Thanks to the WildEarth team. Thanks to you, the viewers, for joining us. And of course, thanks to the wildlife for being the stars of the show. And that's it from me for now. Bush greetings. Please give it horns, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.